Woo! Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Learning with Luce. Today, I am joined by Ken, who is here to talk to us all about schema validation. Hi, Ken. How are you?
Great. How are you doing, Luce?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here to learn all the things. How is everyone this week in chat? What's everyone been up to? What about you, Ken? What's your week been like so far? We've got to Wednesday.
Just plugging along with work. I'm, a curriculum engineer here at MongoDB, so we're working on some new coursework for the university.
Oh, nice. Anything you can share, sneak peek you can share with anyone?
We're kind of going to be, revamping some of that entry level sort of content. So we're working on some CRUD things in language specific ways, so that if you're a Go programmer, you'll have content on how to get up and going with MongoDB. And if you're in Java or Python, there will be separate content out there for that.
Nice. Sounds great. I mean, who doesn't love to learn? That's literally why I made this series.
There you go.
For anyone that doesn't know, I'll share a link in chat, but our university is great and there's loads of really wonderful content that is all free. There we go. So like I when I started at MongoDB a few months ago, I did some new high technical training on university, and I was just so impressed with the breadth of content and the quality and the mixture of kind of interactive labs and quizzes and content as well. So I'm a big fan of university.
Yeah, it's a great platform, and I think we do a pretty good job of getting learners up and going with MongoDB, kind of, from the absolute beginner that has no idea what a document is, all the way up to here's how you can set up your servers and, handle performance and security.
Nice. Oh, hey, Rita's here. Woo.
Hey, Rita.
Ollie's here as well, saying data is cool. Yeah, it is.
It is.
Data powers everything. So what isn't there to love? One of the things I always kind of think about, people don't realize how much you interact with data, but pretty much everything is data nowadays. Whether it's, social media or looking up something on the internet, data underpins all of it.
It does, which I think is, in one way it's great, in another way it's very scary, which is, why things like schema validation are important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will get on to today's topic shortly, but apart from, of course, schema validation, which we'll touch on, is something that you know well. What other topics would you say as part of MongoDB are kind of your favorite things to learn, teach, or just things that you like as features?
I really like the document model. When I was as a developer, trying to spin up an app and have that data layer, data storage in the relational, tabular world, there was always a lot of iterating over how that was supposed to be set up. And you'd build your sample app, you'd get halfway through and you'd be like, oh, I forgot this column or whatever. And then you'd have to redo everything. And Otto's here. Looks like we have a lot of great folks joining us. Hi, everyone.
Otto's here. We've got Jason, who I believe is a regular on the forums. So always good to see members of the community here.
Absolutely.
Member of my community coming by, which is always nice to see the community show up. So we appreciate that.
Anyway, with the document model and the flexibility is just fantastic. So that's one of the things I really, really enjoy talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. So hi, Joel, another joiner. Joel works on my team, so it's always nice to see our colleagues show up. Okay, so we might as well start on today's topic, which is, of course, schema validation. So first of all, the big question, I guess, is going to be, well, we can see what the agenda is, but what is schema validation?
Well, I'll turn around. What do you think it is? Let's, what does it sound like?
Yeah. Okay. So to me, I mean, I know schemas, people might know them as like blueprints from like mechanical engineering. I think schemas to me just thinks of like almost like your data model from like relational world. And obviously validation, I guess it's to make sure that it's validating against like your model to see if it looks like what you think it should look like, maybe.
So you can certainly do some of that. But the other big thing, right, in the relational tabular world, all of your fields have to have a specific type, right? So if you have a first name field, you can't put a picture in there.
Yeah.
Right? Because you'd say, hey, this is a string. In MongoDB's flexible data model, which is great, you can put in a telephone number for somebody's first name, right? And from our database standpoint, we don't care. I mean, it's just data. It's JSON data, right? So it doesn't matter. Which is great when you're spinning up your sample applications and you're kind of getting through your prototype of what data is going to look like in there. But eventually, you want to make sure somebody doesn't put a picture of a cat in as their password, right? Like,
yeah.
You need to have some sort of validation. So there's a few ways that you can do that. You can either do that in the application and make sure everything's done, or you can actually do it in the database itself so that you make sure that whoever's writing the application down the road doesn't start putting cats in for passwords.
Well, yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, why would you want it? Answers that question. Yeah, like you say, there'll be certain scenarios where the flexibility of MongoDB documents is wonderful and makes your life so much easier because you don't need all the answers at the start. But like you say, you don't end up in a situation where someone's then posting cat pictures as a password.
Right. And, I think, most applications eventually get to a point where you know what your data model is going to look like. And you know that you're going to have a first name, a last name, and an email address for a user profile. And you're happy with that and you're not going to change that. So you want to kind of lock that down so that when somebody puts in their first name, it is, a string field and not a numeric value or a date or something that just logically doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to answer the question that we've received in chat, which is, will it be watchable on demand? Absolutely. This is streamed to YouTube, so as soon as the stream ends, it will be there to watch on YouTube.
That's great.
Okay, so we've got a question here. So is that when I'm choosing the types of data that each field will be when building with Atlas, is that schema validation?
So no, that's not. I mean, that's not validating. That's just telling the database what it is, but there's no validation at that point, right? Like you can put that in for the field, but you could put in for a date field, you could put in, Ken Alger for the date field. So if the field name is date, you could put in a string in there and the database is still going to allow it. But with schema validation, which we'll see here in a minute, the database will say, hey, you're trying to do something screwy here. You're putting a date in or a name in a string field in for what should be a numeric value or a date.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen that in Atlas, and we might see it later on. So yeah, you can use our Atlas like UI to specify data and add a document, and it will ask you to just specify a type as you type it in. But like you say, it doesn't validate. It's just telling it what it is.
Right. So if you have two documents, right, that have a first name, last name, and date created field, and the first one, you're putting in the first name as a string, second name as a string, third one, that date field as a date type in Atlas within the UI, you can insert that document and everything's fine and dandy. The second one that you go in, you say first name is Ken, last name is Alger, date is Bob. right? Or Susie or whatever. From a database standpoint, like it will still allow that insert to happen. It will still create that. Once you set up schema validation rules, you can say, hey, that date has to be a specific type, and voila, it'll bounce back or give you an error, kind of depending on how you have things set up.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I guess it kind of leads naturally on to the next question, which is, we know what it is and why you might do it, but how can you do it? I know that you've wrote, and I've shared this in chat, I know that you wrote this excellent article on our website, which talks about kind of how you can do it if people want to go back and read it. But of course, we are live. We can somewhat go through this or talk about it, or whichever teaching style suits you.
Yeah, so there's, that's a kind of a series of articles that talks about how you do it. The first article there talks about how you do it just kind of at a high level, right? So you go in, you can do it from the shell, or you can do it from your driver of, if you scroll down a little bit there, you can, when you're creating a collection, you can, add in your validation rules there you use the validator tag and this JSON schema, and then you write your validation rules. Or if you have an existing collection, you can do that collection modification or call mod command on the collection name and then run those validation rules. One of the interesting things about schema validation is if you already have data in your database and you run the validation rules against or set the validation rules up, it's not going to kick out any of the documents that are already inside your collection, right? So those documents that are already there, maybe it's, your first iteration of your schema design, your first iteration of saving your data, it's still going to be there and won't be validated until you update it or change it in some way. And then on future inserts, that's when those validation rules are going to say, hey, you're trying to put a picture of a cat in here for a date. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, which is kind of what you want, because if you're designing an application and then you, like say, you decide, you've gone through the iterations, you decide what the data will look like, you'll come to a point where your application will work with the data that's in that shape, whether it's validated or not. Your data will end up being in the shape because the application will handle it. So older data, even if documents exist that don't meet that validation, they're probably not in use anyway. And so, like you say, it doesn't matter. Only if you then go to update it and you realize it's live data, that it actually matters that you can apply the validation.
Right. Absolutely.
So one thing I noticed as well is this: for the validators, you're passing JSON schemas both times. So does that mean that when you do schema validation, you're always passing it's always JSON schema validation?
Yeah. So MongoDB has implemented kind of the JSON schema validation rules. And if you scroll down there a little bit more under the JSON schema validation, you can see like a whole slew of what, so this is a recipes collection. I used to be a chef in a different, different career. So I kind of riffed on that a little bit. So in a recipe, we're saying that, there's going to be a few things that are absolutely required. So a name, a servings, and ingredients. That kind of makes sense for a recipe. And the name there is going to be a string, which is the BSON type that we're saying. And the servings there are, going to be an int or a double, which kind of makes sense because you're going to either have, 3 servings or 4.5 servings or whatever from the recipe. And then the cooking method, there's only really, those are the kind of defined culinary cooking methods that you have. So out of when you define a cooking method, those are the only ones that you can put in there. So you can't say, I'm going to, I don't even know what another cooking method would be. Dig a pit and roast a pig, right? Like that's kind of the roasting thing. But you can't just create your own.
Which, yeah, like I say, it makes sense because there's clearly defined methods of cooking.
Yeah. And then down there, you know, in ingredients, we get a little bit hairy with some arrays and whatnot. And with schema validation, there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with arrays, because you can make them required, you can make them optional, you can make them dependent on one another. So if you add, you know, the ingredient name, then you also have to add the format of the ingredient. So if you add onion, you have to say it's diced or chopped or sliced or whatever.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's very powerful because you can, even from just looking at this ingredients like recipe example, you can see that because there's so many different combinations you can do together. You know, it kind of works well with the whole flexibility of how many different structure types that the documents can support, because you can also write the schemas to kind of go validate against those complicated kind of shapes.
Yeah. So again, it's a really powerful thing. And once, you know, like we were saying kind of at the beginning, once the structure of your document kind of becomes clear in your head of what your application is going to be using, and, you know, ultimately what the end user is going to want to be pulling out, right? Like one of the tenets of the data modeling here at MongoDB is data that's accessed together should be stored together. So if you have a document that, you know, and your application is this cooking application and you're pulling up ingredients all the time, all that information should be stored together. And maybe, you know, where you get the onions or where you get your carrots is interesting to people, but not right away. So that data is perhaps stored separately and you're pulling that out. Or maybe your data model is such and the data access is such that you want to have all that information stored right there with your onions and carrots. So the schema validation can really help define and lock that down at the database level. So then you don't have to worry about that using an ORM like Mongoose or something in JavaScript to clearly define what all that stuff is.
Yeah, and I think that's another kind of great advantage of it, because I've seen people use Mongoose previously, but I've also worked in places where multiple projects might share a database, for example. So by having something like Mongoose application level, if you don't have a schema validation at the database, then as soon as you start, you know, the other project that uses the database starts making potentially makes changes, it breaks your code. So I think database schema validation is, you know, very powerful and much more useful.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's another great point. As the data within an organization becomes more solidified, you're going to have a lot of teams potentially writing applications against that data set. And if team A is saying, a telephone number has to be in the US format, and then your other team starts developing in the UK, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, why can't I insert phone numbers? It's not working, right? Like, you need to be able to standardize that and say, hey, no, we just want to make sure phone numbers are integers or whatever.
Yeah, which is, yeah, like you say, is helpful and helps like cross teams. So obviously, you know, the schema validation is super powerful and you can do a lot with it. Do you have any recommendations for tools to kind of help build up a schema validator, like against data that you might already have, for example?
I mean, there's a few ways to do it. I mean, so you can, like I said, you can do it in the shell, you know, Mongo SH, our shell, and do it here in JavaScript and just do it there. You can certainly do it programmatically using this same, you know, format and issue commands from whatever language it is that you're using. So that's great. We also have MongoDB Compass, which is our GUI for MongoDB. And within there, if you connect to a collection.
Oh, okay, that doesn't exist yet. That's okay. I have Atlas open, so that's okay. We can grab let's connect to this one. can say you want to connect with Compass.
Look at that.
Amazing, isn't it? You can just
Yep.
pop in the site and it will just give you exactly what you need depending on the way you're connecting.
Yep. And then if you go back to Compass,
and I can just edit this.
it should say, hey, I've detected a connection string.
Yeah, so I'm going to quickly move this window out of the way so that no one can see me entering the password for this cluster. If I even know what it is. Now we can make a new cluster. It's super easy to do.
So now comes the big question: does Luce remember his passwords?
Well, there you go. That is a question and a half. I mean, I have so many passwords for different things because you never share passwords between multiple things. I probably don't. So we can either find or we can just I have lots of clusters running this. Oh no, I won't. Let's try that one. If not, we'll create a new one. That's okay. Compass. Again, it's super easy. You just pick how you want to connect. What's your favorite tool for connecting to your clusters?
I use Compass quite a bit. Either that or, I mean, it really kind of depends on what I'm doing. I use Compass quite a bit, like I said, or just the Atlas interface within MongoDB Atlas, or the database collection interface in there gets a lot of use as well.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, you can actually go into Browse Collections and you can see like a list of the stuff that you've got. So for example, this just has a video game thing that I started for a tutorial I was writing. But yeah, you can literally browse your data actually inside a Compass if you want to. So what we're going to do is, since this is, I can't remember my password, we can spin up a cluster because it's super easy. And then we can, while we wait for it to spin up, we can look at the ways that you can browse the data. Yeah, I like Compass as well as a connection tool because, as we'll see shortly when I connect, is that you can actually you can create a free cluster. But in Compass, the shell's actually built into Compass as well, so you can mix and match what suits you.
Yep, and as Karen, hi Karen, great to see you. It's been a while. As Karen says, it's a twofer, so you get not only the GUI, but you also get the shell, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I'm just excited because Karen's here. Hey, Karen. Yeah, exactly. I love that. You can. Oh yeah, Joel's a fan of Compass as well. Like I just love it. Like saying my favorite is like there's a shell built in, but as Karen said, you click connect, it just goes ahead and kind of introduces you to it anyway. Like there's a shell, here's a connection. Hey, cool. Like it's super easy. But yeah, so you can browse on here, and there's so many things that you can do with it from here if you want to. You can do queries, and you can do, you can insert documents if you want. So earlier on, Jason was talking about, we're talking about how you specify the type. This is just that if you're doing it in the Atlas browser, you can specify the type as you write it. But like we touched on, it doesn't actually validate. It's just telling you what it is.
Right. So it'll just store that data, right? So if you were to add something into that collection and you put in, first name there is the type as the field, and then right, so name, and then in there if you put in Luce, right? So right now it's as a string, and then you select and say no, I'm going to put that in as a date, right? It's not going to be happy. It's going to be like I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah. But
if you were to do that insert it would be fine with it.
Yeah, because it's just
it's just data.
Okay, so that one I was unhappy, but that's only because I was messing around with it. But yeah, like you say, it will allow you to insert whatever you like, which isn't quite the same. Yeah, so good question, which we can come on to shortly, which is another way you can connect is the VS Code extension.
Yep, so, that's a really nice way to do it right from, if you're a VS Code user, you can do it right from inside your IDE, which is pretty great.
I believe I'll just check there's no secrets on display. No, we're okay. I code sometimes, and like the worst thing happens is that your API keys are suddenly revealed on screen. When I stream normally, I have like a secret screen that pixelates everything, but I don't think it's in my screen. Actually, I can probably double check. Yeah, it's not, but yeah, I have a secret screen where you can just pixelate everything on screen, so you can hide all your user secrets.
There you go.
But yeah, so there's an extension which I've actually got installed. So you can add a connection to a database with the connection string again. So everything's connection string based. So yeah, and as Shirish has pointed out, one of the great things about it is that once you connect, you can actually, and we can have a look at this shortly when the cluster spins up, is that you can actually browse the collections without even, you can use the playground. So if you want to like stay within your, like say IDE, VS Code is a text editor, but if you want to do it, then you can just play around. You can experiment and see what might happen without actually impacting anything. Okay. So Jason's saying, I'm in MongoDB University, but have problems with IDEing course. I've enjoyed exploring and experimenting. Do I need to keep dummy data, or can I get rid of it to make more room for things I want? It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly get rid of dummy data.
Yeah, it's one of those it depends questions, and that's answers, and it's such a cliche, I know, but it really does, because if you're using the dummy data to experiment and you're moving on to using your own data, you don't need it anymore. But if you're just learning, you might find the dummy data is helpful.
Yeah, that, and within MongoDB University, we tend to use the same dummy data for multiple courses and kind of continue on. I mean, if you're in a specific course or module, and we'll generally keep the same data set throughout the whole thing. So if you delete it every time, you're going to have to be reinstalling. Yeah,
and so we've got with the clusters deployed now, but there's no data in it. So if we browsed it, you'd see there's absolutely nothing there. But what you can do, which is cool, is if you do the ellipses here and click load sample data set, that will actually go in and load a load of dummy data that you can then work with. So I believe university uses the dummy data from this sample data set.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I think we've migrated all the courses and content to using that data set because it's so easy to use in Atlas, and it's kind of a standardized thing so that everybody starts off on a even playing field.
Yeah, I don't recall using anything other than the sample data set when I was doing my training on university. It used different collections in the sample data set, but it was all from that data set. So yeah, it's great because it's just there for you to use.
That, and the other thing that I really like, I mean, not only is it just there for us to use, but there's a whole slew of different styles of data in there that are, the schema is structured differently in several of the data sets. So you can really go in and look and see how data can be modeled within MongoDB and kind of get some ideas for your own applications of, it doesn't just have to be strictly key value pairs. It can be much more dynamic than that. And as Karen said here, if you mess the data up, you can re-download it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as Karen also pointed out, you probably have loads of room. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard people running out of room for documents in their database. I mean, it might be possible, but I can't see it happening. Bye, Karen. Nice to see you.
Karen, lovely to see you.
But, I just love the breadth of ways that you can connect. You can browse, you can look in the browser, you can use Compass, as we'll see when it connects shortly. You can do it from the VS Code extension, which I believe is technically still in preview, but it's it's a very full-featured extension. You can connect from your applications. If you click connect, never do this, but it's okay for a demo because I'll kill this cluster afterwards. But you should never just allow access to anyone. But it's okay. Just do as I say, not as I do, and all that. I'm just going to move this window over here just in case we reveal any secrets by accident. We're okay. Let's move this back. So once you've got the user created, you can then pick how you connect. So you can do the shell. So that's, as you mentioned earlier, Ken, the Mongo SH. So you can download it as a tool, and you can then use it from command line tools, whether that's PowerShell or iTerm or the built-in terminal, command prompt, depending on your platform. Of course, there's Linux versions too. Or you can do it from an application. So you can say, let's go back. I'll go back. There you go, go back. So you can also connect from your application. So, super helpfully as well, you can actually pick the languages, and then, we can say C#, for example, and I'm using, the latest and greatest. And if you really want, you can even tick a box, and it will give you some sample data of sample code of how to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's all language specific code, very idiomatic there for the language, so that you can get up and going with connecting it right away, kind of through all those different languages listed there, which are quite a few. Yeah,
it's very impressive. Like you got C, you got Go, even Perl.
Ruby, Scala, PHP. I mean, if you can't find one that you're using, and those are just like the officially supported ones, and there's a whole slew of drivers out there, that are community supported as well for a lot of other languages.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know I've seen reference to one for Dart and Flutter.
Yeah.
So it's great, and I think what's good as well is that a lot of the time there's similarities between the connection strings. So you'll often find that actually, even if your language isn't officially supported in this list, actually finding a connection string that will work isn't too bad.
Yep.
Obviously, the full driver code example won't work, but the connection strings will, which is great. Yes, Node indeed. I'm more of a C#.NET developer personally, but I have been known to write front end. I was doing React on Saturday, which was with JavaScript, which was interesting.
Yep. It's always fun to be bouncing back and forth between languages, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I literally have a series called Learning with Luce. I spend so much time learning. It's just something new, isn't it? It's interesting. But here we go. So we can see there's been activity, and so we should eventually have our sample data set loaded. A lot of it will just depend on the tier you're using, I believe, but we'll get there. The data set never changes. It just takes a few minutes because you get so much amazing free data that sometimes it just takes a while.
Yep.
But, that's only the initial time you load it. The rest of the time it's fine.
But you might actually be able to connect with cluster and see connect with Compass now and see what data has been loaded already.
Yeah. So I'm going to do this off to one side because this I do know will reveal my password. So even though I'll delete it afterwards, just for good security practices, I will.
Your password is password, right? Because it's nice.
No, that I can promise it's not. So it's just connecting. I'll see if it will connect. I'd show the screen, but the password's like in the background, so let's not reveal our secrets. What about you, chat? We've had a few people share their favorite tools, but or even
Ken
if
tells dad jokes.
tool,
That is the best password. I think I would probably make it super secure by doing exclamation points for the L's there, because then nobody would ever guess that.
Yeah. I love dad jokes, which, you know, like I'm not a parent or anything close to a dad. So, but I just find them really funny. On my personal blog site, I actually have a section at the top which calls a dad joke API. And every time you refresh the page, it will tell you a new one.
Oh, that's great.
Because why not? There you go. Shiri's doing all the work to generate passwords for us.
I can get rid of my password management app now and just have Shiri generate them all.
Brilliant. So yeah, but I was just touching on for tools. So we've talked about the different ways that you can connect and tools that you can use, and people have shared their favorites. But has anyone in chat learned about a tool they didn't know existed today? So it was a good one. A lot of the time, people don't know the extension existed. Oh, there we go. So we're connected in Compass now. Woo! And it's slowly loading the sample data sets. They're not all there, but
yeah, but there's some. I mean, like the restaurant data set is interesting to go in and look at.
Have a look. So I'll just zoom in a bit so it's not too small for people. So as we mentioned before, there's a shell built in. So as soon as you click it, it actually connects you to your collects the database automatically. But we can, of course, use Compass to browse. So there you go. We've got all the documents. So zoom out a little bit. Yeah, we've got grades. Interesting. Is that like restaurant reviews?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So it's kind of a fun database to go through. If you open up the address field up there at the top, you know, there's coordinates, so there's geospatial data in there.
Oh, wow.
Again, this is all, you know, stuff that would be really important to have if you're doing schema validation, right? Like in your coordinates field, you want to make sure that you don't allow strings, because it will become a challenge for your GPS processing application to parse strings if it's a string for instead of a longitude.
Yeah, that could get interesting. And so, yeah, so say this is kind of like an example of, like, you know, obviously it is an example of real world data, but if this was our data, like what is the easiest way to kind of start to generate like a schema or validation for it?
So if you scroll up on your screen a little bit,
can't go up.
It's just, go right back. I don't know. So for whatever reason, I can't see the tabs up there at the top, but when you hover over them, they were popping up. So aggregation,
I think it's just the brightness thing.
schema, if you keep going over to the right, is validation.
Oh, wow.
So this interface here allows you to add rules for your validation.
Okay, so we can. Okay, well, this is helpful. We've already got a GUI to do it. Help us write it.
Yeah. So the validation, what is that? Act on. So there's an error, I think, is one of the options, and the other one is a warning. So you can go in and, I mean, this is kind of a powerful thing as well. You can set up your validation rules so that if somebody tries to insert a document or update a document in a non-validated fashion, right? So they're putting in a string for those geospatial coordinates. You can either have it as an error, so it just literally bounces back and says, whoa, no, I'm not doing this. Or as a warning, so it will accept the document insertion or update, but in the logs, you'll get a warning about it and say, hey, Ken inserted this document and it was wonky. and then you can handle that. And then over on the validation level there, you can do strict. So that applies to all inserts and updates. And then moderate, it applies validation rules to inserts and updates on existing valid documents, but it doesn't apply rules to existing invalid documents. So that's kind of an interesting thing there. And then the GUI is really kind of nice because once you set up and you need to go in and do the JSON rules there in the interface, but it will show you those sample documents that pass validation and something that failed the validation. So as you're writing your rules, you can see, oh, hey, I'm meaning to write a validation for, geospatial coordinates being a string or being an integer or being a double or whatever, and seeing, oh, hey, these pass the validation, so they're good. Or, oh, hey, I said geospatial can be a string on accident, right? And therefore, here's all my documents are not going to fail because they have numbers in there.
Yeah, and can you kind of set different actions or levels for different fields? So, do you have to specify everything about your document, or can you just be, only certain fields you want to apply validation to?
Yeah, you can just specify, as you're going through the schema validation process for the document, you can say these fields are required. You can say these fields are optional. And then you can further lock it down and say, these are all the fields that can be accepted, right? So we're not going to accept anything out of what I've said here. So I only want first name, last name, phone number, and email address. Right. And then if somebody comes in and tries to insert their Twitter handle into it, you can say, hey, no. I only want first name, last name, phone number, email. That's it. Or you can say, I'm requiring first name, last name, phone number, email, plus whatever else you want to put in there is fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just I don't know, does Compass support dark mode? This seems to be quite bright on screen.
I don't believe we have a dark mode.
It's just going to be very bright then. I know a lot of developers don't like light theme. But yeah, I was thinking, one thing we can do is try and write for, a restaurant might be complex document, but just write a very simple validator so that we can see what it looks like, not only in Compass, but then if you try to insert something that's invalid, what you'll actually see.
Yeah. Let's see what, I don't know. Are there other, why don't you refresh over there? There we go. So we have all sorts of stuff now. Trying to think of a collection there, a database that would have something that's relatively easy to write a
companies, maybe? Nope. Oh, grades are simple enough. It's just student scores and a class ID.
Yeah. So, from a validation standpoint, we go over, and so we want, let's see, in the validation, we're going to want that, and I forget what the name of those fields were. Oh, down there at the bottom.
Yep.
That's helpful. So we want student ID to be, what do you think we want that to be?
A number, I suppose, like an integer number format.
So let's try putting, up there in student ID, doing up there in the validation rules. So student ID : and then int in parentheses and see if that works.
Like that?
Not parentheses, sorry, quotes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Switching to Windows. I'll spend all day on Mac. There we go. Okay, yeah, so they all fail because they're not in.
So clearly, whoever created that data, right, the student ID is not put in as an integer. So this goes back to as you're putting data into Atlas, what can happen. All right, so I don't know, try and see if turning that int into a string up there, if it's happy then.
Nope.
Nope, maybe it's a double. Huh.
I'm interested. Is there a...
So you can explore your schema, do analyze schema.
Let's do it. It is a double. Interesting.
That's interesting. The student ID is a double.
Class ID is also a double.
Let's go back to validation.
Yeah, it shows you a very valid point, which is, yeah, you can deep dive into the shape of your data in Compass. Like everything that we want to do, we can do inside Compass. It's an amazing tool.
Yeah, so actually, here's something that's kind of cool. Let's go back to the restaurants.
Yeah.
The restaurants data set again, and restaurants, and then analyze the data there.
Ooh, let me see that.
And open up the address field.
Okay. Oh, wow, look, it's a map.
Roll down a little bit. It's going to show you the GPS coordinates on a map.
Wow, that's awesome. That's very impressive. Woo, celebrate. That's cool.
You can zoom in on the map.
Compass. Didn't have to do anything fancy.
Yeah, so if you zoom in on the map a little bit, so it looks like, you know, most of those restaurants are going to be in New York. And again, this is just the 1,000 sample documents that it's looking at.
Yeah, I think if it loaded all the data in one go, it might.
Yeah, it'd be super slow, right? But so this is just a sampling of 1,000 of the documents, but you kind of, it allows you to get the idea of what you're doing with your data and what it looks like. And as awesome. Sherry says here, it really helps for you to see how clean your data is, right? So if you know that all of your GPS coordinates are in New York City, for example, because that's only where your data was taken from, and in your Compass data, review and schema analyzation here, you find a whole bunch of things out here in Oregon where I'm at, you know that your data has some issues.
Yeah. Yeah, like you say, you can just test the cleanliness of your data. So that's awesome. I love that, and it's just built in. And is that just that map's just there because we passed coordinates? Correct.
Just because awesome. Compass knows that you have GPS coordinates in there, you've tagged it as a coordinate in your data, and it's just going to plot them. Huh. Similarly, if you look at the there's another, I think the geospatial data set, or their shipwrecks. If you analyze that data.
I also love how quickly it analyzes the data as well.
Yep.
Especially when it's loading coordinates.
So that's, this data set has shipwreck data around. I'm guessing that's US.
Yep. All along the
and
coast.
down there in the Caribbean and whatnot.
That's amazing. Yeah, so like you say, if you've got data with coordinates in it and you're using compass, there you go, you have a map. So you can look out for, like you say, looking for points that aren't there, then you know something's not quite right. That's awesome. So if we go back to, is it training and grades? What does it tell us about grades? Okay, so we can, got an array, got the doubles. It's interesting though that like we saw it wasn't keen on a double. That's okay. We can.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that we're just not doing something. We're not passing in something correctly there into that interface, which has changed since the last time I've used it. So,
well, this comes down to a great question. What resources can we use to learn more about this stuff?
So there's the blog series that I wrote. It's a couple years old, or a few years old now. But I can pop that into the chat. There's a 3-part series. Actually, I don't know. Let's see, comments where doesn't look like I have an option to pop things into the chat.
That's okay. I've done it. There you
go. Yep. And then, so within there's some, links to other resources. There's actually an article on how you use document validation rules using Compass. So that probably should have read that before I hopped on the call a little bit more thoroughly. But there's that resource by our very own Andrew Morgan, who's amazing. And then, of course, there's, and I noticed back up a ways, I forget who said it, something about our docs being particularly good, especially around Node and JavaScript docs.
Yeah.
But our docs on schema validation and collection modification are also really helpful for all this, for schema validation.
Yeah, no, it's great, and like I've found so far that I've never struggled to find documentation that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, our docs team is pretty amazing. Not only are they amazing people, but the work they do for our documentation is really top notch, in my opinion. Looking through a lot of other documentation out there as you're trying to build something, I think ours is right up there with the best of the best, and they stay on top of things in terms of changes that happen, as new products and features are released. They're right on top of any changes that we need to know about as developers.
Yeah, and I think it always says a lot about a company, about how they approach documentation, because I know it's been a joke amongst developers, especially for a while, about who needs documentation or coders documentation. But so many people come to something and want to learn about it that I think it's much more welcoming and much more appealing if the documentation is there to help you.
Well, that, and if the documentation is right. I mean, yes. I'm sure you've gone to sites, even company sites that say, here's how you implement this feature in .NET, and you follow along there in their documentation and nothing works. Right. And it might not work because you're using a different version, or you're using the latest version, or whatever. But documentation on a corporate site that doesn't work is super frustrating, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we can just like, we do tend to do quite well on Google, so we can MongoDB Atlas schema validation. I'm sure we'll find. There you go. Cut results docs.mongodb.com. Wonderful. You can do it in different ways, and I love that. And there's concepts and there's all sorts. So I'll drop that in the chat for everyone. There you go. So yeah, there's this whole documentation around how you can do it. Now, a lot of these, of course, talk about, create collection, and then, this is kind of the shell way of doing it, isn't it? Or if you're in Atlas itself, like,
this would be the command line, non-GUI way of doing stuff, which, a lot of us developers still are holding on to the command line from our, youthful days of working in the command line.
I'm wondering something like that. So I'm wondering if it's something like, like that. So it should be, no, not yet. I thought maybe that might be how we got it to pass validation.
Yeah, well, I think we should play around with it, Luce, and then we can, I don't know. Now that you're in the developer advocacy team, maybe a blog post or something about how you use Compass and
that is
Schema
a great
Validation.
idea. Yeah, I can write. We can get it solved, and then we can write. I can write a blog post about it. You can read it and make sure that I've not written anything silly. And then it's more content.
You can just do you can do a short YouTube video on how you do it and post that on your channel.
Or do both, because people consume content in different ways.
Absolutely. And we all learn in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So technically we've got a few minutes left. So unless people want to watch us try and work out how we do this, is there anything else, like really valuable resources or lessons that you've learned that you want to share with people?
I think I'm okay. What I would, if you want to learn more about MongoDB in general, go to MongoDB University, check out the amazing blog posts that, the developer advocacy team has on the Dev Hub. That we have a lot of resources for how to learn MongoDB.
We do. We can even visit them and have a look. So we've got like university.
And all those courses are free, which is just awesome.
Let me log in. But yeah, there's so many courses, and if you're not quite sure where to start, you can pick a learning path, which is always great. It's just wonderful, and you can start with from the, like you said earlier, you can start from the very, very basics and move up to more complicated things.
Yep.
Which is brilliant. You mentioned Developer Hub, which is at developer.mongodb.com. So this is articles written by employees. So, people that are passionate enough to go, oh, I care about this topic. I've learned something. I want to share it with people. Here you go. So, it's normally, some of the most interesting, but also up-to-date content. Things might go out of date, but, people write about something because they're interested.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I think that when you get into the industry of being a developer, as soon as you write a blog post, it's out of date, right? Like as soon as you hit submit, some package has been updated or whatever. But it's really kind of the theory and the structure behind the blog post that really is important to kind of walk through. And if you get bugs in, what you're trying to build because your package is outdated, you can probably muddle through it. And we try to keep things updated, but there's just, it's drinking from a fire hose that's, backed by a fire hose. It's crazy. Yeah.
And like you say, sometimes things can go out of date quite quickly, but it's still interesting things. And that's another reason why I really appreciate the docs and the docs team and all the work that they do, because it's so easy for things to get out of date, and yet they always, things are always on top of it, which is great.
Absolutely.
And you can search articles, you can filter by products. If you want to learn about something specific, you can go into it and look, or you can even filter by language if you want to. I like doing the C# one because you often find fun stuff, like Nick mentioned. The most, is content on game development. There you go, building a game. There you go, one of Nick's articles, building a space shooter game, because believe it or not, you can use Unity's game development with MongoDB Realm. So, MongoDB underpins so many things.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful. And then obviously, last but by no means least, we have our community. I access this on my work laptop, but not so much outside of work. But yeah, I believe it's community. Yeah, and then you've got our forums where a mixture of, employees.
Yeah, this is the forums are
enthusiastic community members.
Yeah, and employees hop on there as well. So if you have questions about MongoDB, the forums are definitely where to go ask, because you get everyone from MongoDB employees answering questions to people that use MongoDB out there in the wild, and it's a great place to go and learn and ask questions and just become part of the community.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I know that I've logged into the forums recently, to help somebody with a problem, and it's just what we're there for. It's the community is a place where you'll find anyone with an interest. So if you just want to talk about MongoDB, it's a place to go. If you've got a question, it's a great place to go. If you just want to hear about something, we even have sections on, under media, there's tags that you can go to, and then you can find information. So, for example, we have a post about this very stream. So you can find out about events, you can ask questions, even about university.
Questions about MongoDB university courses. I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful things that you can do in there.
Yeah, like I've been in here, and when I was doing one of the, the modules, it's like basics, for example, if you've got a question, there's frequently asked questions. Oh, there we go. Should be back.
You're back.
There we go. I am. Internet had a moment.
Technology is great till it isn't.
Should be back now.
I can hear you.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My internet at home is just due to lack of infrastructure. So apologies, everyone. But hey, at least we managed to get to the end of our discussion, and I learned loads of stuff. I don't know about chat, but and I'm really excited to go and play with schema validation and actually try and get it working with our grades database, or even restaurants, and then make content about it.
There we go. I look forward to seeing it, Luce.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us. Chat, and especially you, Ken. Thank you for finding the time to come and teach me something new.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I
hope it wasn't too traumatic.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Oh, wonderful. Right. Well, I will see everyone soon. I believe we have what's coming up on the events. I'm sure we have an event soon for, let's have a look. I believe we have another stream coming up shortly, not today, but in the schedule that's well worth attending. I'll just double check. So, upcoming, here we go. So, yeah, oh no, it's not scheduled yet. But yeah, I know that we've got some exciting streams coming up. So look out for those. Get involved in the forums, try some schema validation, and we'll be back next month for another Learning with Luce with another amazing guest. So thanks again, Ken, and thank you for joining, everyone.
You bet. We'll see you later. Great hanging out with you and talking about schema validation.